ever think about how much sports are, like, tied to history, like really tied to history, especially colonial history?
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're going deep, like deep into post-colonial theory
Okay.
and how it changes the way we see what happens on the field or the pitch, the court, wherever, you name it.
It's really interesting. Postcolonialism basically looks at how empires, especially the European ones, impacted the people they colonized.
Yeah.
Their cultures, who they are, all of that. And these ideas like hybridity, the mixing of cultures,
Yeah.
and mimicry, where they kind of take on the colonizer's ways.
Oh, interesting.
And the whole idea of identity, it's like
Right.
all woven into global sports.
So some people, hear theory and they just shut down.
Yeah.
But I promise this isn't some, like, heady abstract thing. We're going to get into actual examples from
That's
sports
good.
we know,
Hmm.
like cricket and football, even the stories of some amazing athletes.
Yeah, to really get this, we got to go back in time to when European powers, especially the British, were expanding their influence everywhere. And you know what they brought with them?
What's that?
Their sports.
So it wasn't just like fun and games for the colonies, where there was a deeper reason.
Exactly. They saw sports as this way to, like, instill discipline, to civilize the colonized people, and of course show off that British superiority.
I
It's a subtle way to reinforce their power. But, and this is where it gets interesting,
Okay.
the colonized people, they didn't just accept these sports.
Yeah.
They took them and made them their own, something new entirely.
Okay, now that's a twist. So that's hybridity in action, right? Like
Yeah.
mixing the colonizers' influence with local traditions.
You got it. Perfect example. Cricket.
Okay.
Take India. The British introduced it,
Mm.
but it spread beyond just the elite.
Yeah.
It became a way for some to maybe mimic their rulers.
But then India became this, like, cricket powerhouse. And now you've got the IPL, the Indian Premier League,
Cute.
with global attention, tons of money. Is that just India being good at the game, or is there something more going on, something maybe a little rebellious?
That's a great question. The IPL, it's fascinating, takes the traditional structure of cricket and throws in like Bollywood-style entertainment, all the flash and commercialism. It's uniquely Indian, British structure with an Indian heart. Is it mimicry?
Mhm.
Empowerment?
Mm.
Maybe both.
And the Caribbean, too. Cricket there has this whole different energy, lively, musical, a real celebration of Caribbean culture. How can something with such colonial roots become, like, this expression of local identity?
Well, the Caribbean's history with all the plantation slavery and colonial rule, that adds another layer. They took cricket and added their own rhythms, their own spirit. It really shows how, even in a colonial sport, you see this strong local identity shining through.
Yeah.
And it gets even more complex when you think about athletes who come from former colonies but play for European nations.
Wow, yeah.
Talk about navigating different worlds.
Or like living examples of hybridity, right?
Mhm.
They represent all these cultures, heritage, experiences. Makes you question how we define national identity. It's not so simple.
Not at all. Makes you think, huh? All those layers.
Yeah, it's like they're always caught between these different parts of themselves. And it's not just like a modern thing either.
No, not at all.
One that really stands out, Zinedine Zidane,
Oh, for sure.
the French footballer. I mean, his parents were from Algeria, right?
Exactly. A former French colony.
Man, Zidane, his footwork was something else. I never really connected him to this whole post-colonialism idea, though.
It's there, woven right in. He was born and raised in France, but that Algerian heritage, it was huge for him. Part of who he was when he played for France. It was more than just representing a country. It was like he was carrying all that history between France and Algeria with him, right there on the field.
So, like, his wins weren't just about being good at the game. They meant something more.
Exactly. They had all this historical and political weight to them. And it started these big debates in France, too.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Some people saw him as a national hero, especially after he led France to victory in the '98 World Cup.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
But others questioned, like, where's loyalty lay? Used his Algerian background to argue about immigration and what it meant to be French. Instead of just celebrating his talent, they turned his identity into this battleground.
So it was like he was stuck between two worlds, never fully belonging to either?
That's the thing. It really highlights how tough it is for athletes from these post-colonial backgrounds. They're expected to fit in, to represent a certain image of their adopted country.
Right.
But then they're judged based on their heritage, on being different. It's like a no-win situation.
And we, as fans, we probably don't help. We project our own ideas onto them.
Oh, yeah.
We see them as symbols of national pride or whatever, without even thinking about all the complex stuff they're dealing with personally.
You hit the nail on the head. Their journey to get to that global stage, it's full of obstacles we often don't even see.
So, like, how can we as fans be more aware of all this? How do we go beyond just cheering for our team and really understand their stories?
It starts with recognizing that athletes are more than just performers. They're people with their own lives, their own backgrounds, their own
Like
struggles.
recognizing they're human. Their lives don't begin and end on the field.
Exactly. And when we do that, we can start to see the world of sports in a new way, a way that understands the history, the power dynamics, the whole fight for identity and representation. So we've talked a lot about hybridity and identity for these athletes,
Yeah.
but there's another side to this conversation, right? This idea of resistance through sport.
Absolutely. Sport isn't just entertainment. It can be a powerful way to challenge those in power, to assert your identity, to reclaim your narrative. Think about the West Indies cricket team in the 70s and 80s. Their dominance was a statement.
Yeah, it was like this bold act of defiance, like they were refusing to be defined by their colonial past.
Exactly. Their success on the field became this symbol of resilience, of overcoming that colonial legacy. It was a powerful declaration of their own strength, and it inspired people all over the Caribbean and beyond. And it's not just cricket, right? We've seen it in other sports, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Athletes using sports to fight injustice, to advocate for equality, to give a voice to those who've been silenced.
You think about Tommy Smith and John Carlos at the '68 Olympics, raising their fists in that Black Power salute. That was a moment that went way beyond sports.
Powerful image.
It became this symbol of the fight for racial justice. Or Colin Kaepernick taking a knee during the national anthem. It caused a lot of controversy, but it started an important conversation about racial inequality and police brutality in America.
These athletes, they took a stand, they used their platform to shine a light on injustice. They changed what it means to be an athlete. They became symbols of resistance and inspiration.
They did. Their actions remind us that sports are a part of the real world, the social and political realities. They reflect those realities, and they can be used to challenge them.
It's about recognizing the power of sports to change things, to disrupt the status quo, to empower people and communities.
And post-colonial theory, it helps us understand how all these struggles for identity, for equality, for recognition, they're playing out on the global stage of sports. It gives us this framework for understanding the complexities of the sporting world and appreciating those who dare to challenge it.
It's been really eye-opening looking at all this through a post-colonial lens.
Yeah.
It adds a whole new dimension to how we see sports and the athletes.
It really does.
So we've talked about hybridity, mimicry, those personal struggles of athletes navigating different identities, the power of resistance through sport. But this is such a big, complex topic. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. What else should our listeners consider when they're thinking about post-colonialism in sports?
There's definitely more, yeah. One thing that comes to mind is how post-colonial cultures and identities are shown in sports media, like in commentary and stuff.
Yeah.
How do they portray athletes from these backgrounds? Do they do it with nuance, with sensitivity, or do they fall back on stereotypes?
Makes you think about those subtle biases that can slip in, like how they describe certain athletes, the words they use to talk about their playing style. It's like those old colonial ways of thinking are still shaping how we see sports, even if we don't realize it.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of economic power in global sports. Like, how does colonialism's legacy still affect things like access to resources, sponsorships, even how wealth is distributed in the sporting world?
That's huge. It's not just about the games themselves. It's the whole system around it, the money, the media, the influence. You can still see the impact of colonialism in all of that.
Goes back to understanding the bigger picture, right? When we acknowledge these historical forces, we can start to break down those power structures and make things more fair for everyone.
It's like we've been watching the game with blinders on. But now, with post-colonial theory, we're seeing the whole thing, the history, the culture, the politics, the personal stories. It's a lot, but it's also really eye-opening.
For sure. It's about being more aware of how we consume sports. Not just passively watching, but really engaging with all the complexity, challenging our own assumptions.
So if there's one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this, what would it be? What's the most important thing to remember about post-colonialism and sports?
I'd say the key takeaway is this. Sports are like a mirror of society. They show us our history, our values, our struggles.
Right.
By understanding colonialism's legacy, we can really grasp how complex the world of sports is and use that knowledge to create a better, more just future for everyone.
So it's not just about watching the game, it's about understanding how it got here, who's playing it, and how it affects the world.
Exactly. And it's a journey, you know? There's always more to learn, more perspectives to consider, more layers to appreciate.
This deep dive has definitely changed how I see things. I feel like I have a whole new way of looking at sports. I'm going to be looking for those post-colonial threads everywhere now.
That's the way to do it. Keep asking questions, keep pushing back against the status quo, keep exploring all those connections between history, culture, and power that make up the world of sports.
Love it. And on that note, I'm going to leave our listeners with something to think about. Think about your favorite sport, the players, the teams, the rivalries, those moments that make it so exciting. Now, look at it through this post-colonial lens. What do you see? What stories pop up? What new meanings do you find? I bet you'll be surprised.
The world of sports is full of stories just waiting to be told.
Exactly. Well, thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into something fascinating. Until then, keep those minds curious and those conversations going.